I mean, it's the frustrating part is the pace because you're stuck at government's pace. You get things that are presented to you that you need to deal with or do or take care of, but you can't actually do them. You have to wait for a hearing. You have to wait for whatever the next meeting with a government person is, and all the while you have to just sit there. You can't say anything. You can't do anything because anything you say can and will be used against you. I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are going to freak out about what I've said so far, even though the government already knows everything that I've said.
Right.
So everything I've said, the government already knows. So I'm not really worried about it um, in that respect. But it's just, and so we're working towards making that happen as fast as possible. There's a bunch of misinformation that comes up because the public doesn't have access to everything, uh, mainly because there are laws and that involves children, and so they don't get access to everything, and that's the way that goes. But like for example, people say like I'm not submitting to drug tests or whatever, which is completely false.
Right.
Uh, I'm 100% compliant with everything that the government's asked me to do in regards to child custody stuff. As for the criminal case that's going on, we just don't have anything to do in the criminal case until our next hearing is the 21st, and so I just have to wait next month.
Right.
So, like, I work with my lawyer and we figure out what to do in ahead of that hearing, but that's a ways out.
And so, and again,
Between constantly thinking about this pending legal issue, and also still trying to.
your kids have been taken from you, though, correct?
My kids are taken from me. My kids are on a what's called an emergency placement. It's related to their parents were arrested, and the kids have to go somewhere. Thankfully, we have significant amounts of family close by, and they were able to they're able to house our children in the meanwhile. So our kids are with family, and but they're not at home, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I've seen some speculation out there that they went with like
Sure.
strangers or something like that. No, that's not true. They're with family, and we get to see them. It just has to be, there are rules around seeing them.
So they have not been taken by the state, is what you're saying.
I mean, they've been placed into a temporary placement with family. So in that respect,
With your
they
own
have
family,
been
like with your
taken.
own relations, though, right? Like not like just
Yeah,
random.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and to be clear, our children are like in a pre-trial probation. They have not we haven't even had our trial on child custody. It's what's called an emergency placement. The determination is that an emergency existed within the home. That was determined by the allegations from the execution of the search warrant. Right, the search warrant execution, as the internet well knows, alleges that a substance was removed from my home,
Sure.
and so in light of that, there's an emergency placement that occurs until the county or the state is able to adjudicate whether the children are in need of ongoing services. That hasn't happened yet. We haven't gone to trial on it. So right now, it's like I said, it's like a pretrial probation to analogize it to a criminal case.
So, and again, you can get into this or not. Do you think that that's being used against you, like in one manner? Like, of course, you want your children back in your home, and you have 5 kids, and I'm reading this, and I don't know the full aspect, and it's like, wow, are they talking about
Let me
separating
address
these kids?
something. Hold on. Let me
Go
address
ahead.
something real quick,
Sure,
because the
sure.
probation is us as the parents, and the children are in temporary placement. I'm not blaming the children. Anyone who thinks that I
No.
said I was blaming the children I'm saying that there was an emergency placement determination made, and that's akin to a trial probation. The actual trial on whether or not the children are in need of protective services happens later. But the way the state operates is that in the interest of the child, they defer to the side of safety, right? And so they presume that an unsafe condition existed because of the search warrant's execution. Once we go to trial, they'll make a determination if the children need to be placed into foster care or returned back to us, or if they need to, go for like a temporary time. The state wants to move forward even farther. That all happens later. That hasn't happened yet. It's simultaneously frustrating and it's also not. Because one thing, of course, the truth, like, what happened.
Yes.
No one else knows. The state doesn't know. They have to construct, their story, and then I go and the state go and we argue our stories. That's court, right? So that hasn't happened yet. But in the meanwhile, what happened in your own house and with your own kids.
Sure.
And no one else does. But the only story that the people on the internet hear is whatever comes out, and it's from the state, unless I decide to go out and tell the full story. Obviously, there is no way to talk about anything in your own best interest outside of court. Like, there just isn't. It doesn't matter who you are or what your story is. There's just no way to do it. So I have to wait until that story to court before it can be stated online. So the consequence of that is that in the meanwhile, people will determine whatever they determine. And so it's like, it sucks because things that didn't happen that people think did happen, but that's all they can go off of is the information they have. So you can't really be mad about it, and it sucks, but what are you going to do? So what happens now for me is wait, eventually tell the story to the court, and then once that telling is done, and everything's resolved, I can share my side with the world, and then they can make their determinations or keep the same ones that they've made. And that's just, like, there's nothing you can do about that.
Now I'll ask you a couple tough questions here, and you can answer as you please. There are first off, I've stated on the record, there's a follicle test. I don't put any stock in that. You don't have to say anything there, by the way.
What I think you're alluding to is shit like that the follicle test or whatever.
Yes.
Which is got its own story. And again, this is a frustrating one to talk about because there's so much to that. And people are going to take that in the opposite way. I'm not even talking about there's so much to the results or whatever. I'm talking about there's so much to the release of that and the circumstances around it that, again, that whole story isn't even done being told to the court yet. So like there's so much about that, and I can't say anything because what I can tell you was when we were informed, we were absolutely incensed because frankly that results, there's a thought that the state would use various things as leverage in maybe another situation. So there's sort of, in a situation like this where you have a criminal case and a custody case, you have two parallel tracks that are happening on different timelines, and what happens in one can affect the other.
Sure.
In very impactful ways. For example, statements in a child custody case may impact the criminal case, leading to liability. Like if I were to say something in the child custody case, they could technically use it in the criminal case.
Yes.
So what that does is it makes it really complicated to communicate with the state in the custody case, because they want to talk about a whole bunch of things, and saying anything regarding certain subjects, puts you at the chance of having a statement misused against you in the other context, because the state then has the ability to say, well, they're not answering questions. Like, well, I have a Fifth Amendment right to not answer questions of any kind. But then they say, well, if you don't answer questions, how can we bring children back to your home? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you meet your burden to show that they shouldn't be there? And it goes back and forth like that. So it's like, without getting into specifics about what things the state can do, having this parallel track on the two cases means that things that happen in one impact the other, and timelines in one can impact the other. And the state uses that leverage in both cases at the same time. They know you want your kids back.